We good to go? All right. Hi, everyone. This is my talk. Something for everyone, everything for someone. So, my name's Matt Hall, and I'm almost 40 years old. I was born in regional Victoria in Edenhope, and I've been making games for about 3/4 of my life. So I wanted to start just by showing you my background, just really for fun. So this is the first game I ever wrote when I was 8 or 9 years old. It was called Jackpot. It's pretty amazing. That is literally the extent of the game. I when I first got my Commodore 64 when I was 8 or 9, I only got given one game, and so I played and finished that very quickly and had nothing else to do. But there was a manual that came with a computer as well, so I got into programming almost straight away, just simply because I had to do something with this computer. I made Jackpot, and then later on the Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit came out, and I was also obsessed with aliens at the time. So we've moved on to 1986, and it sort of empowered me to do my first ever graphics. Before that, it was actually quite complicated to program graphics in any interesting way. A few years after that, this is a Game Boy Advance game I did, but I actually wasn't programming for legitimate Game Boy hardware. I was programming on emulators illegally, I guess you would say. This game had no sounds because no one had leaked the Nintendo sound libraries. It was my little attempt at a Zelda game. And the Search for Shadow ended up being put into my portfolio and landed me my first job in the industry in 2000, I believe it was, where I worked at Tantalus for approximately 6 or 7 years. I can't quite remember. And Top Gear Rally was the game I guess I remember most from that period. Mainly UI things and sound integration. I certainly didn't write the 3D engine for this game. But all the UI elements buzzing around, that's all me. And so I just, like, when I was young, I guess that was my most indie period, where I was making games only for myself and trying to entertain. And so in 2008, I formed ClickTalk and went independent again. Finally had enough confidence to be able to do that. And you may not know this about me, but as far as my output on the App Store goes, I've released 5 games and had 3 #1 games. So I've actually been reasonably successful on the App Store. So this talk is going to cover essentially 2 tracks. Like, for me, design and marketing are inseparable. Other people would disagree with me, but I've always found that when the design team and the marketing team are on different pages, you will see the absolute worst that game development has to offer. You get very muddled, poorly targeted products that do really badly. So yeah, this talk is going to it covers both. So you'll see more what I'm talking about when I go on. So what I wanted to talk about today, I've generally whispered to people in their ear over the years, like how I've managed to get 3 #1 games, and but I wanted to open it up and talk about the specific technique I use openly. I discovered it while I was at Tantalus, and I continue to use it, or a version of it, for all my products since. It helps me keep on track when making products out of my comfort zone, and nearly all of the products I make are out of my comfort zone. I don't necessarily make the sort of games I would play. So this is my secret, and I hope you all take it and give it a try. So the genesis of the technique began when I was working on a game called Pony Friends for Tantalus. So I'd worked on several. I initially began as a programmer at Tantalus, and moved into design and management when I was split off and worked in Tantalus Asia for a while in Malaysia. Then when I came back, I was an associate producer, and Pony Friends was my first game as a full producer. so I had a reasonable amount of control. So this is Pony Friends here. So we started work on the title. It was for the Nintendo DS. We started work on the title in around, I can't quite remember when it was, 2005 or 2006, around then. And I actually didn't last the entire duration of the project. I made it halfway. I was starting to have dreams/nightmares about horses, and at that point it was, yep, I'm gone. But I think that I left a really strong stamp on the project. Like if I go back and play it now, it feels like something that I would make. It sort of has that sort of click-tock sort of feeling to it. Even though obviously there was lots more people that worked on it than just me, and there was designers and things like that. But so the original idea came from Ian Livingston, whose pitch to Tom was, well, let's do Nintendogs with horses. Like that's actually a pretty good idea from a marketing perspective. But I don't think there was anyone, maybe there was one person at Tantus who actually had an active interest in all things equine. But so it was quite a difficult project because everyone sort of had to change. You know, it's not exactly the most exciting thing to work on for many people. Like most people like to work on things that they would themselves want to play. So that was sort of the genesis. Like I'm beginning to work on something that I don't quite know how to handle, and I had to change my mindset and think about, well, what's this game? Who's this game for, and what's it going to be like? The interesting thing is that it's a good way to put this. So for a subject you would think not many people would be passionate about, everyone constantly, as the producer, everyone was coming to me with ideas on this project, and from all crazy different places. And so every day I would have someone come up to my desk with questions like this, like, why isn't equestrian in this game? What does the boy or girl look like? How old are they? Let's talk about the clubhouse, and just constant questions. I don't understand why they cared so much, but they did. And so it was just a large part of my day dealing with these sorts of questions, and I just had to come up with a way to get everyone on the same page. So I had sort of an epiphany. So this is the historical target demographic of these sorts of games. You know, the genre was actually really popular in Europe and Germany especially. And all the games released in that genre had the same elements, like high society and dressage and equestrian and pony clubs and dressing fancy. But I grew up, as I said, in country Victoria, and that wasn't my experience with horse culture. So we owned horses when I was young. I didn't really ride them, but Mum rode them all the time, and my sister liked to ride the horse on occasions. And I certainly didn't want to make a clone of everything else in the genre. So, as I said, I was getting really frustrated. I wanted to get everyone on the same page. So what I did is this was sort of my main defining thought, that a rich kid who has a pony is certainly not dreaming about owning a pony and probably doesn't want to play our game. So I went out onto the internet and I found a photo. I actually can't find the original photo anymore. I went looking for it. But it was a photo much like this one. So it was a girl. Just look at this photo for a minute and talk about the girl and the horse that's in there. I mean, so she's 8, 9 or 10 years old. She's obviously clearly obsessed with horses. Like she's pretty happy in this photo. You know, but maybe she owns this horse and maybe she doesn't. It might not be hers. She's obviously not rich. Like she's not wearing the standard country road. You know, it's like a bit of probably a poor family. And I mean the horse itself. I mean, if you take a look at it, like that's an old horse, I would imagine. That's pretty relaxed. That's a very calm horse. And it's probably, that horse is probably the 100% the most important thing in the world to this girl. That's how I felt. That's how I felt when I looked at the image. So what I did is I printed it out, took it to the photocopier, and made copies of it and stuck them all up over the office. And I said, every time you want to ask me one of those questions, you look at this photo and you ask yourself, would this girl like that? And then if you think that's true, then come see me. And it worked really, really well. Everyone was immediately on the same page and understood what we were trying to do. It drove the project forward because no one was asking questions anymore. So I want to talk about how it actually affected this game. So there's no equestrians in the game. No equestrian in the game. There's really just, you just feed the apple to your horse, and that's a lot of fun. And you can clean its hooves and take it for a walk in the countryside. And your character was also a photographer, so we built in sort of a Pokemon Snap thing, where as you're riding along, you get to take cool photos of the animals in the world. It's just a reason to ride. And like, we still had crazy questions, like from the publisher. There was one where the publisher absolutely 100% wanted horse racing in this game, and I couldn't get them off the idea. And they were saying things like, if you yell at the horse, will that make it go faster? So, although everyone on the team was on the same page, there were still issues with the publisher, but we could tell immediately, like, a girl's probably not going to want to yell at a horse to make it want to go faster. But we did, like, it still had affected that part of the game. Like, this is the horse racing section in which you screamed at the horse to make it go faster. But you'll notice that there's no man, woman, boy or girl riding those horses. And that's to make sure that that girl didn't feel uncomfortable looking at the horse and wondering, who the hell is that riding on my horse? Or what's that person wearing? Again, once you have an avatar, it starts to raise all these questions about where's the game set. Like, all the rest of the game is played essentially from first person, so we don't have to worry about that problem. But again, because based on publisher insistence, this was the best way of dealing with it. I mean, it's a bit weird that these horses have saddles and are just racing away, but it was weirder the other way. So after all of that, Pony Friends was a massive success, selling over 1 million copies. I'm not sure what the exact number was, but definitely over 1 million. Tom's mentioned that several times. And it gave Tangela sort of their first big franchise, yeah. And I don't have a massive credit in that game, but as I said, I'm sort of oddly proud of it. And the philosophy and design and technique, like, perfectly managed to capture the audience. Like, people really loved the game. And I've always wondered whether the girl in the photo managed to, like, whether she actually played the game, but I'll never know. I'll unfortunately never know. So, as I said, I went independent in 2008, and Little Things, my first title, was released in 2009. It took about a year to put together, but that was a very busy year, as like, we had our first child, and we just moved back to our parents' farm, so I wouldn't have to have some crazy cash burn rate of an apartment in the city. Yeah. Horses again. So, Little Things, have you all played the game? Maybe, yes, familiar. Yeah. So Little Things, it's a hidden object game, so you can see all the objects that are hidden in there, and the game will give you a list of things to find. And it was inspired by my love of Where's Wally as a kid, and I really was always fascinated with the detail in the images. Probably around 6 million downloads for this game, so a bit more popular than Pony Friends, but of course most of those were free downloads, but it's still a very big exposure for this title. And by that point, my horse nightmares had subsided, and I was able to put together this image. So the reason I made a hidden object game is that hidden object games during that period were doing really well on a website called Big Fish Games. Have you all heard of that company? They're still around today and make a lot of iPad games. But at the time they were a PC publisher, and they were making essentially a game a week. And large amounts of those were hidden object games, and the audience was just lapping them up. $7, $7, $7 every day. And so I played these games, like, obviously I liked hidden object games, but the sort of games they were producing here, I think this is Ravenhurst, the art style didn't necessarily appeal to me, and the way they picked up the objects wasn't very dynamic, and they always had this lame mystery story in them. All of them. And I felt I could improve on the genre. So this is my mum. So I wanted to make Little Things, although it was for me and like a young version of me, I wanted to try and make a game that Mum could play. because on Big Fish Games, nearly the entire audience was women over 60. And that they were the ones buying these games each day. So I thought, well, if I keep my mum in mind, she'll be able to. Because I was living with her at the time, and my wife and child. So we went. Well, if mum can play it and mum gets addicted to it, then that's maybe that's enough to get it over the line. So. Clear instructions, super accessible, low pressure, non-gendered imagery, and most importantly, like Little Things are sometimes categorised as a kids' game, but I made a lot of effort to ensure that if you were an adult and playing it, people weren't going to look over you and think you were playing some kiddie game. Yeah. So it actually has a very wide reach in that regard. Yeah. However, when I launched it on Big Fish Games, it was an absolutely spectacular failure and earned just $3,500 in its launch month, and that was its peak. It just descended, and I spent a week or so in bed just going, "What have I done? A whole year's work, $3,500." And analysing it later, I realised that the failure of Little Things stemmed from my failure to properly adopt that technique. And the reason, like the technique I mentioned at the start, the reason is because I aimed it for my mother, who was not a hardcore gamer. But on Big Fish Games, they are the most hardcore granny gamers that ever have existed. So this is a picture. So this is the Big Fish Babes. So that was that's their official terminology. That's not something I made up. So they would actually invite the Big Fish Babes into the Big Fish office and show them around. Like these were their whales. Like they buy every single game that came out on the website. So they come over to Seattle, visit our studio. They were into hidden object games like young teen boys are into Call of Duty. Right? They like it samey. They hate it when anyone changes the formula. And you'll be you're just eaten alive by them if you dare make anything different. It has so much in common with the Call of Duties in the world. It's quite funny. But if someone had told me this, that like I probably should have sought advice early on and said, "Am I making the right game?" But if someone had said to me, "No, you're not. You have to make this game. It's a mystery. You have to use this sort of art," I never would have made it. This was a review on the website. It's beautifully articulated. This was not the worst one, but it was long sort of covered it. I mean, but this sort of shows how hardcore they are, and I want to play exactly the same game as I played last time. Okay, what's the big deal? And although you sort of laugh at it, I mean, this is good advice. This is what I should have done. Yeah. The good news is that a year later after I released that, the iPad was released by Apple. And I thought to myself, well, maybe I might port it to this. I mean, I've spent all this time on it. I can probably port it in a couple of weeks. Maybe it would be worth doing. And of course, because I'd aimed it for my mum and someone who hadn't necessarily used a computer a whole lot before, it was really the perfect game for all those people finally getting iPads for the first time. So it was just a sheer accident that I made a game perfect for the iPad, and it came out within just a week or two of the hardware launching. It was perfect, and Apple featured it straight away, and that became my first chart-topping game. And Mum still plays it, which is great. Okay, so moving on to Doodle Find. So while this is actually prior to the release of Little Things, they were actually released in a very tight window. So after Little Things failed, I moved on to, I realised mobile was big. The way I realised that it was big was I went to the Casual Connect conference in Seattle while I was looking for, essentially just chatting to Big Fish. And at one point during the conference, I sat at the back of a talk and looked out onto the audience, and 1 out of 2 people had an iPhone. And I realised, well, that's pretty good market penetration. That wasn't the case. Like, obviously, 1 out of every 2 people has an iPhone now. But back then, that was developers. They were all developers, and they all had this device. And I went, well, there you go. That's definitely going to be the future. So I ran out and got an iPod Touch. I didn't have an iPhone at that time. Yeah. So, um, one of the games I played the most on early was Bejeweled 2 and Bejeweled Blitz, which made a really big splash on Facebook at the time, and they released the mobile version not long afterwards. And it was really big. Do you all remember how big that game was at the time? Yeah. It had a particularly big impact on my family, and my wife was really addicted to it. And she wasn't playing much of Little Things. And I went, all right, why don't I try and make a game for her? I wanted to try and see if I could break her Bejeweled Blitz addiction. And so this was Super Search 60, which was what I made. So I made this game in 2 weeks, and then I spent another 2 weeks doing the Facebook integration. So it was an enormous 4 weeks of development for this title. And B really liked it, which was great. But I certainly wasn't featured by Apple when I released it, being just a noob on the store, and the icon was a bit ugly, and Facebook integration was actually mandatory. You couldn't play the game unless you logged into Facebook, which was not a wise idea. But what I did is, so it was 4 weeks of development, and then I did 8 weeks of fixes. So looking at things, so I removed the Facebook integration, I cleaned up the way this worked and improved the awards you get as you're playing. And it really started to come together, and at one point my numbers, instead of, like, they were minuscule, but at one point instead of going down, they started to go up. And I realised it was actually spreading itself around virally. Yeah, and at that point I decided to do something drastic, and that was to ride the Doodle bandwagon that was going around at the time. So there was an app store. There was a category that sat there for quite a while, which was best Doodle games. And at the time I was going, how am I going to get this game featured? And so it sort of became this gateway. But doing this, it managed to help the art quite a lot. Like you can see on that previous slide, the art was quite muddled. Like those images looked pretty good in Little Things, but when they're not sorted by colour anymore, and some are weird sizes. So with Doodle Find, I sought to unify the palette and the look, and it made for a much stronger game visually. And what I did is I flipped my entire fan base from Super Search 60 into Doodle Find by letting them know constantly, hey, this game's coming out. I just spammed them with ads for 2 weeks prior to the release of the game. So the day it was launched, I had all these people ready to go, boop, and it worked. It went up into the charts without any effort at all, because I'd managed to build a reasonable amount of people who were playing in Singapore and Hong Kong, and was doing reasonably well in Australia. So organically, I got a pretty good hit in Singapore, and that made Apple pay attention, and then they featured Doodle Find a few days later, and that went to #1 for a week here in this country and in Hong Kong, Singapore, a lot of Europe as well. It was featured, and I was eventually knocked off the #1 slot by Grand Theft Auto. I was very happy with that. And then B still really loved it, which was great. Again, the person I made the game for continued to play it, but she kept playing Bejeweled Blitz. And I've never really forgiven her. So you might notice by now there seems to be a bit of a pattern with the people I'm targeting. They've all been women. You know, I targeted my mum, and then my wife, and then some random little girl who I'll never actually meet. Over and over again, I've been creating games for females, and the result of this is that on my ClickTalk's Facebook page, like 3 out of 4 people who like ClickTalk are female. And that's rather unusual. Like, after I showed people this stat, other people went into there with generally sort of general all audiences games, and no one reached anything like this. I'm quite proud of this achievement. Yep. Okay, how are we going for time? Okay, right. Zona. So this was rather a different product for me. And it was made for a guy called Sergei Seidlitz, who was an artist I discovered when I made Little Things. You might not know this, but I couldn't draw. And I learned to draw over the course of that project. and part of that was researching. And this guy, I absolutely adored his art. He's got so much stuff. Like, this was one of his pictures. He does a lot of commissions as well as a lot of freelance, like personal projects. This looks a lot like Hoka Mate. Found this one the other day. This, you can see like how it's almost hidden objecty. There's a little bit of influence in that picture with little things, just a little bit. Yeah. So I wanted to make a game for him. I've never met him, of course, but I decided to do it anyway. And as a part of that process, what I did is I learned. I don't know him, so I just went and learned everything I could about him. Like, he's not a. So I figured out he went to Camberwell College of the Arts, and I looked into the art camp, the program, and the other sort of art, the other sort of art that people who came out of that program were doing, and tried to. It's not a case of trying to rip him off. It was a case of trying to understand where he'd come from and what sort of things he likes and what he doesn't like. This is actually the same college that David Sermon got his Master of Arts from, and I was quite excited when he said, "I'm going to Camberwell." Yes, I know that place. So I looked at all of Sergei's projects, including and particularly his colour. Like, I didn't understand colour that well at the time. And I like to think, I understood it in some way, like I could tell that I really like the colours in that picture, but I wasn't sure why. Yeah. So at one point I realised, like, the game itself was sort of this, like, the idea of touching the largest zone I came up with really quickly, and I never really strayed from that. But all the research I was doing was, like, it wasn't so much changing the gameplay, but it was changing everything to do with the look and feel and the game, and I'm trying to make something that would appeal to an artist, and it completely it freed me from my pragmatic side and allowed me to concentrate more on the artistry of the title. So this is Zona. Have you all seen this title? Yeah. So what you do is you just have to touch the largest zone. So it's a mobile title. So it's the yellow one there. That's the largest one. Every time you touch one, it quickly whips it away, and then there's another one there, and there's another one, and it gets harder and harder and harder. And the more mistakes you make, then it steps you back, and it becomes easier and easier. It's a very fast game. It's got to be played in 90 seconds. And it has the most weird learning curve of any game I've ever played or made. It works essentially on lizard brain. It becomes instinctual. It's like riding a bike. So I haven't played this game for a while, but I can, like, boot this back up and get almost 500,000 every time, because it's trained me to find zones. Like, I can instantly recognise area differences now. Disaster Piece did the music as well, because I wanted to try and find music that would appeal to, it's not foofy casual music. It's like kind of interesting indie style soundtrack that actually reacts as you touch the screen. Yeah. So I'm really, really proud of this title. Unfortunately, this is absolutely 100% the worst selling game I've ever made. Like, Big Fish did better. Like, I could not even give this game away. It was free. No one would download it. But those that did really loved it, and it was really well reviewed. And this had me really, like, absolutely baffled. Like, Apple didn't feature it. I just couldn't understand why, because I'd made such a good effort, and I think it's a really beautiful looking game. And I figured it out probably 3-4 months later. This was the problem. This was my App Store screenshots, which is the absolute opposite of what I was attempting to do by making an arty game. Like, I have no idea what I was actually thinking. I mean, the logo's on there 4 times. There's just, some of the art looks okay, some of it does not. I'm trying to upsell it on the bottom. Challenge your friends, but upsize your mind. Like, it's just embarrassing to look at this, because the reason, like, I've spent all this time on this technique and trying to make a game for someone, but that should encompass the entire fucking game. Like, I don't know, it's just messed up. Like, you can look at him. he would really hate what I had done there. Like, he would not download the game. So eventually I finally figured out why I was so stupid, and I stripped down the bullshit marketing spiel and tried to make something that was a little more super hexagony. Yep. So this is a bit more intriguing. I would download this. I wouldn't download that other one. Yep. Hardcore action puzzle game. Just tried to slightly spell out what the game is. Keep it a bit more subtle. Yep. It does okay now. So the takeaway really is it wasn't a financial success, but it was absolutely a creative success. And the reason is because I was using that technique in a completely different way by choosing who I made it for. I'm sure the game really appealed to artists, and there's so many of those looking for video games to play, right? Yeah. But like Tim Schafer played the game and showed it to me on his iPhone one day. It reached the people that it should have based on what I made. So, Deck War. When I was at uni, I discovered Magic the Gathering, and I was absolutely fascinated with it. There was like the card shop, whatever, that had these books on how to play Magic the Gathering, and I grabbed a couple and just read it. And like the idea of synergy between cards and rare cards and common cards, and it's just like a really fascinating, interesting game. But the people who used to play it at my university were like, I don't necessarily consider myself a nerd. Like, I don't really like. Sounds like it's difficult to talk about. Like, the people who played it were, snickering, didn't want to socialise with anyone, probably sweaty. Like, they really fit that stereotype. Yeah. Like, I love the game, but I could never find anyone to play it with. Yeah. I collected the cards and just sort of pretended. So, like, Deck War was an attempt to humanize this game and make it interesting and make it casual. So what happens is you take a card out from your deck and throw it out onto the battlefield. You drop it in that white zone there, and boom, the characters jump out of it. Sort of like a Magic the Gathering visualizer almost. And these, they have weaknesses and strengths against one another, and so the idea of making this was born out of, I went to Casual Connect where attendees from DNA and Gree were doing talks, and they were showing these absolutely ludicrous numbers with regard to how much money these games were making. And again, because I'm somewhat of a consumerist, I guess, hence the hidden object thing, I was like, I wonder if I could make one of these games, even though I really don't like them. And 6 months later, I was in the shower one day and I went, look at it. I know how to do it. And then, so yeah, it's Magic the Gathering with a war going on. Like, there's just crazy battles, and this guy likes this, and this guy makes poison gas everywhere. It's a lot of fun. I'm really proud of the title so far. So this game, I was making it with two people in mind. So the person on the left is Nick Sutner from Sony America, who used to be on the One Up show. And went over to Sony, and I know, like, I follow him on Twitter. He plays Ascension and those types of card games a lot. As well as he was one of the people who championed Hohokam. So I'd imagine he would like the sort of art style that I was producing. So I wanted to make a game deep enough to keep him interested. But at the same time, I wanted to make a game for the little consumer on the right, which is Holly, my daughter, with a bag full of Skylanders, I believe that is, on Skylanders launch day. So I wanted to make a game, because she hates my games. And that really pissed me off. So I said, damn it, you're going to like this one. I really wanted to make a game that would totally capture her attention, yeah, which is hard, and that worked brilliantly. Like, she absolutely loves it. She stopped playing it now because I haven't updated it for a while. Like as I was adding new characters and things, she was always interested in what's that new character going to do. And she used to do this thing where she got pretty good at it, but whenever she died, she quickly switched it off so she wouldn't die. And like the look of the game is obviously I wanted to, again during my research, I found a lot of illustrators, so I wanted to make something that looked like a living, breathing illustration. So it only took me 6 weeks, and I worked with Ben Weatherall, and we took a really amazing demo to GDC, and we were like really pumped about it. The issue was, as I said, I made the decision to make one of these games when I went to Casual Connect, and they're talking about these card games, and I realised at some point that I had lost that goal, that the game I was making was no longer necessarily going to appeal to Asia, which was important to me. This is Puzzle and Dragons. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's does all right, a little bit of money. So I played this game and went, oh yeah, there's elements in here that's a really good fit. I think I can do this in a good way if I just take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and push it together. Then I can start to appeal. But the thing is, like I said, I was quite off base. So target number 3, my technique became all of Japan, which really, it completely broke the way I thought about video game. The things I was thinking when I was making this video game, man, I already have the card collection element. We can power up cards, but then will Holly like it? And then will Nick like it? So Holly might like it because she likes the idea of powering up cards. She plays those other games. But Nick would really hate that because then it will mess up his ability to play with his friends without the time collection aspect. And down the rabbit hole I went. It was... I could not reconcile the different goals, and it completely destroyed my motivation to make the game. Like there was one where, okay, if I do this, it's going to impact the decision I made 3 months ago, which I can no longer remember because I didn't write down what I was thinking when I was asking that question. Like it just completely destroyed the project, yeah. So I've stopped working on Deck War, but all these shots you see from the trailer, which was just completed by Emma Kelly from, was it one of my friends at Tantalus. And I'm certain I can solve all these issues, but I need to, in some ways I need to start again and properly pick my target. Am I making a game for Holly? Am I making a game for Nick? Or am I making a game for Japan? And throw away and start again. That's probably going to be the wisest thing to do. So the technique clearly can't be adapted to multiple parties. All right, modern day. So Crossy Road is coming out next month. Let's talk about this for a little while. So I made this in 12 weeks with Andy Sum, and Ben Weatherall produced the art for the game. Have you all heard of Crossy Road? I should have been talking about it a lot, yeah, of course. Somewhat like Frogger. It's Frogger-esque, but it's an endless runner. The inspiration for this game for me was actually Flappy Bird, which was just a crazy success this year. Have you all heard of Flappy Bird? Yeah, I thought so. Made by a single Vietnamese guy. He's been making games for a while. I actually just played Flappy Bird quite a while ago, and his other games. I've been playing his games for a while and was really happy when this happened to him. His games are really clean and to the point and very simple, nicely integrated score system. And to me, they wouldn't feel out of place in WarioWare. Like they feel very WarioWare-esque. I really like his games. And the big thing with Flappy Bird is that it's completely disrupted the way people think about free games on the App Store. And, you know, people are looking for short burst games that they can just play and share with their friends and then move on to the next thing. Whereas before that, those sorts of games were far and few between. You know, people are now sort of looking for that next phenomenon game. If you have a look on the App Store now, they're filled with these types of games. Now, I did not want to make a clone of Flappy Bird because, well, that's just stupid, really, and everyone else has already. I mean, who would legitimately think that that's a good way to make money? I'm going to clone something that already exists, which is already market saturated. And I mean, the cloners were just lucky he took his game down, because then they all reached up to fill the vacuum. If he hadn't done that, the clones never would have had this much success. I mean, there's no point photocopying something. But I wanted to make a game that someone who enjoyed Flappy Bird would enjoy. So that's not cloning the title, but trying to understand what elements were in Flappy Bird that worked, and why did people really attach themselves to the title in such astronomical numbers. So in this way, I didn't quite follow the technique. I didn't really have someone in mind, but we often, like Andy and I often talked about what someone would, how they would feel about it. So I mean, the first thing with Flappy Bird is it has very short play sessions. Like you can just tap once and then dead. We really wanted to have that. So from the very first hop in Crossy Road, you can be squished by a car or jump into the rapids, or a train can just destroy you. Like, it's a dangerous place, and if you're not concentrating, you're just going to die, and that's funny. High score table, obviously. You want to make a game where people can challenge their friends, and this is we've been keeping this character secret for a while. We put Doge in the game, or how do we say it, Doggy. We have arguments on how to actually pronounce that. We wanted to put culture into the game, or memes, or stereotypes, things that people would connect to. So there's a celebrity in the game, Frankenstein, vampires, and this. And so I would hope that people would look at this and laugh, right? And say, oh my God, you have to see this game. Which is what happened with Flappy Bird, but we can't do that with Flappy Bird anymore. So we had to find our own way of making a game that people would talk about. And this was our best attempt, was to put in all these different characters and have people talk about, oh, you have to see this character, I just unlocked it. And then, because they haven't unlocked it yet. And then they share. And then they tell two friends, and they tell two friends. And so on and so on. Oh, sorry, I was going to say. So this character, Doge, was actually the most important character in the game for me. Like, when we put that in, it was like the game finally felt real. Because it wasn't just a game anymore. It wasn't just hopping across the road. It actually became something that could penetrate culture, and we're like, yes, this is working. And we spent Andy spent a lot of time integrating the characters to make them all feel unique and interesting. And that's it, that's Crossy Road. So I'm going to have a little rant, just a little one. I'm going to talk about jazz. Unusual, I know, but I have a point. So I've listened to music for a very long time, like all of my teenage and adult life. Like I describe myself as a hipster whale. What that means is, like, legitimately, a hipster whale is someone who spends all their money trying to discover things first. So I would go to JB Hi-Fi after work, and if I couldn't find 2 CDs to buy, I wouldn't buy any at all. I spend a lot of money at that store, and I have just a ridiculous CD collection. So I can appreciate music in ways that other people can't, because I listen to so much of it. And that's what, like, even with all my musical knowledge, I still couldn't listen to jazz. Like, jazz is, you understand, like, that's an impenetrable music. I think that jazz is generally made for jazz musicians. Right? They're making stuff for themselves to listen to. That's my theory on jazz. Because I tried, like, and if I couldn't do it, I don't know who else can. I think that jazz. It stresses me out because I feel that indie games are often the same way. Like, indie game developers are often making games only for themselves. And in that way, the general public can't appreciate them. And there's some really great stuff being made, like absolutely beautiful games that other people just can't play. Yeah. And I wish that wouldn't necessarily be the case. I mean, you know, Mingus was a genius, of course, but most people would never be able to appreciate his stuff. So, do you all know this game? Spell Tower? So Zach Gage is an indie developer who challenged himself to make a game in a genre he hated. Like, he hates word games. And he made Spell Tower, and is, of course, a massive success. And I wish this would happen more often, that people who make games for themselves would just branch out and try something completely new, and you'll probably end up with a massive hit, or something that could enter, something that could be culture itself. It's a big challenge to make a game for other people. It's something that I think I've mastered, making a game for other people, but I'd love to see more people attempt it. Monument Valley also falls into this category. So before this talk wraps up, I want to talk briefly about choosing it. Like, if you all want to use this technique, I'm going to just run you through some examples of people that you could make a game for. So I have a bit of a reputation for people will bring games to me and say, "What do you think about this game?" And I have a reputation for telling them exactly what I think of it, as nicely as I can. But I don't like to lie to people if I think their game has zero prospects. Yeah. And one of the first things I'll ask people when they bring me the game is I'll say, "Well, who is this game for?" And yeah. So maybe this is Brandon Boyer, and like, if any of you have aspirations to make a true indie art game, why don't you stick a picture of him up on the wall instead of making it for your friends? Make it for Brandon Boyer, because this doesn't mean cloning games that he likes, but actually researching the games that he covers and try and figure out why he likes the games that he likes. Yeah, he's a fantastic critic, and he's on Vine, and the games he favourites on Vines are just from all these disparate sources. Like, he has just a brilliant eye. Really, really cool. This is Anita Sarkeesian. So, you know, why don't you all try and make the sort of game that she would like? And that would, like, the sort of what would come out of that process would probably help people, inside make something completely new. Steve was a notorious non-gamer. He really didn't like games on these devices early on. But of course, he made Breakout. He was the originator of that game. So, if you could design a game that would appeal to Steve Jobs, you would probably definitely get a feature on the App Store. So what do you think Aladdin, Sane era Bowie might like to play? I think I probably wouldn't be very fun, but I think it would look and sound amazing. Yeah. Or I've had this idea, and I've chatted to several people about it. There was this the Molly Jam, where people were making games based on these ridiculous premises that would appear on this fake Peter Molyneux Twitter account. So instead of a Molly Jam, we could have a Holly Jam. So imagine a game jam where everyone gets together and they make a game, and it's not judged by your peers. Instead, it's judged by my 6-year-old daughter. Right? The sort of output that game jam would produce would be like, I would like to play those games. So in case you're wondering, like, Holly likes dragons, Skylanders, tomatoes, reading, drawing. She loves poop jokes. But she hates competition and challenge. She hates bullies, she hates eating chili, and she hates bedtime. So with that weird collection of likes and dislikes, if you start to imagine what that person would like, and then you make a game and try and win a competition that she was judging, I think that would be a really interesting experiment. So anyway, moving on. So as I said before, if I ask people, who's this game for, these are some of the answers I regularly get. I made the game I wanted to play is a really common answer. And it's not a fatal mistake, of course, to make a game for yourself. There are lots of examples of really successful games where the person made the game that they wanted to play. But it is incredibly difficult to maintain objectivity when you're developing a game for yourself, because you become an expert at it, and then you make it harder to compensate for the fact that you're an expert at this game. Or if you're producing a linear game, you've already seen the content, and so you no longer understand what it's like to be excited by the game. Like, it is really difficult to make a game for yourself. This is another common one. I made this game for my friends, which is sort of leads back into that jazz problem I was talking earlier. Like, making a game for your friends can create barriers of entry for regular people. And, you know, regular people like to play video games. Yeah, and the game can often require significant inherent knowledge because your friends have been playing it for so long. They've been playing it for the last 6 months or a year, and so who else can actually come in? You know, you're not going to put tutorials in it for your friends. I mean, Spelunky is a great example of someone who made a game for his friends and it was really successful. So again, this isn't a hard and fast rule, but it's just maybe not everyone should do this. Maybe make a game for someone else. As Ken Wong said the other day, like, he did a talk at DICE, and he used the phrase "we are the 1%," and that's a good one. I mean, it's almost like privilege. Like, we understand what it is to make a game and play it, but what about everyone else who doesn't understand that? Don't they deserve to be entertained too? Yeah. Now, this is a really tricky one. So, when I founded ClickTalk, the idea was I'm going to make a game, a company with games for everyone. That's my goal. And of course, there's no way in hell. Like, I very nearly destroyed my career as an independent by trying to chase that dragon. It's just not possible. Like, you cannot make a game. You just can't make a game for everyone. Some people really detest accessibility. Some people can't play a game without accessibility. So this is the quote that I read this from Nathan Vella from Capybara. And at that point I realised, like, I read that quote and I went, oh, bullshit. And I was like 5 minutes later, I'm like, damn it, how did it take me so long? Like, it's not intuitive. Like, I've worked for years before I realised that was the truth. Yeah. I mean, video gaming is so large now, like a wide range of cultures, experiences and ages and cliques and expectations. And within that field of gaming, as you know from recent events, there are polar opposites that will never ever get along. So you can't make a game for everyone. So I just wanted to do one final note on my technique and say this. I mean, the technique works because, you know, if I follow it to the letter, I don't have to think about these things. I don't have to think about demographics or store trends or what is a tween or politics or cloning or what are the competitors doing. All I have to do is focus on making a game that can be everything for that one person. Yeah. And that's it. I cannot believe that talk ended on time. I had no idea. I can probably answer 2 questions. Yep.
You can answer the last one.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yep.
Could you also repeat the name of that boy guy? What was his first name?
Brandon.
Brandon.
Yep. Any other questions? Yep.
So what games do you like? What is your taste? Because you talked about like the ones you make probably.
Yeah. It's a very difficult question. Probably System Shock 2 is actually probably my favourite game of all time. That was the one where it's like a first-person shooter, but it's deep, and it got me back into, like, it was around 1999 I played that game, and I was not in the games industry, and that was the game that went, I've got to get into the games industry, and so I slowly worked towards that goal. And the other one was probably Dungeon Keeper 2. I like the idea of units that I don't have to control, but the world is living. Yeah, and most modernly Terraria. That game really just, whoa, it's amazing. I played that a lot. Yep. Yeah, one more question. Yep.
Do you think there's a danger that someone that you're making it for could end up being a stand-in for a demographic, like that you're supposedly making it for a particular person, but that becomes tweens in your mind?
So if the person becomes a demographic, well, that's part of the goal. That's intentional. Like if I make a game for my daughter, there's going to be other people like my daughter, or like the pony friends is the best one. Like there are a lot of people who really love ponies, and none of them had ever made a game for them. But by focusing on that one girl, it helped to broaden it. Or little things where, as I said, I was making it for my mum, but I also made the point where I was doing non-gendered artwork because I didn't want to make a boy feel weird about playing it, so to speak, if that's like, it's an unusual way to put it. But there's nothing wrong with making it a little broader, but as you see, when I did Deck War, I made it too broad and it just blew up in my face. Yeah. One more. Yep.
Do you find that how wide your target audience is determines the unit cost pricing of your game? Like, for example, a roguelite like FTL or Splunky would, or Chalkfinder case were a smaller niche audience, but they'd be very dedicated to playing that game, while something more general like Angry Birds, which appeals to a wider audience, would be
Yeah.
It targets
Yep. For that
casual audience.
yeah, the person I'm aiming for definitely determines the price. Yes, of course, because like with the woman who was sitting there playing Flappy Bird, she probably doesn't buy games. Like, probably doesn't. So that game would have to be free. Yeah. And people who play roguelikes are probably far more likely to want to buy them. Yep, of course. Yeah. It just affects every decision. Yeah. You just think about what that person would like and you do that. Yep. And that's it. Thanks everyone.